10 chilling details of already horrific murders. Welcome back to Odd Occasions, the channel where we explore the darkest corners of true crime, history, and the unexplained. Today, we're diving into some of the most disturbing murder cases that have shaken the world. What makes these crimes even more terrifying are the chilling details that leave even the most hardened true crime enthusiast in shock. Prepare yourself. These stories are not for the faint of heart. From killers giggling while reporting their own crimes to terrifying secrets buried beneath highways, each of these stories reveals a disturbing truth. Evil often hides in plain sight. Let's begin. Number 10. Giggling While Reporting Murders. In January 2015, in the upscale De Zal's Winelands estate in South Africa, neighbors overheard raised voices coming from the Van Breda family home. The next morning, they watched as police and paramedics arrived at the scene, soon learning that 3 members of the family had been brutally attacked with an axe. The youngest son, Henri, was treated for minor injuries, while his sister Marlee was rushed to the hospital with severe head trauma. Henri was quickly taken in for questioning, covered in the blood of his parents and brother. While Marlee remained unconscious and suffering from amnesia, Henri claimed that a masked intruder had broken in and attacked his family. He described the assailant as a man dressed in black, wearing gloves and a balaclava. As the investigation progressed, Henri's story began to unravel. Not only had he waited more than 3 hours before calling emergency services, but when he finally did, he laughed while describing the attack, saying, "My family and I were attacked by a guy with an axe." This bizarre and chilling detail left investigators and the public horrified. Ultimately, Henri was convicted of murdering his parents and brother, and of attempting to kill his sister. He was sentenced to life in prison, and his appeal was denied in 2018. Number 9. Message from Beyond the Grave. On August 13, 2018, Nicole Utoft Atkinson filed a missing person report for her friend and colleague Shanann Watts and her 2 young daughters. Nicole had dropped Shanann off at home earlier that day after a business trip. But Shanann, who was 15 weeks pregnant, missed a crucial doctor's appointment and wasn't answering texts. Worried, Nicole went to Shanann's house, knocked on the door, and rang the bell several times, but got no response. Growing increasingly concerned, she called the police and informed Shanann's husband, Chris Watts, of the situation. When the police conducted a welfare check, they found no trace of Shanann or her daughters. The following day, Chris appeared on TV, pleading for the safe return of his family. However, just days later, on August 15, 2018, Chris Watts was arrested after failing a polygraph test. Initially, Chris claimed that he had strangled Shanann in a fit of rage after confronting her about his affair, and that Shanann had killed their daughters in retaliation. But as the investigation unfolded, Chris's true actions were revealed. In reality, he had suffocated his daughters with a blanket and strangled his pregnant wife before hiding their bodies in oil tanks at his work site. Chris Watts later confessed that he had killed his family to pursue a life with his new lover, stating, "I thought it would be easier to be with Nicole if Shanann wasn't pregnant. I knew if I took my hands off her, she would still keep me from Nikki." His horrific crime shocked the world. In 2020, a documentary about the murders was released on Netflix, and it reignited widespread interest in the case. After watching footage from a police surveillance video, viewers claimed to see what looked like an image of a fetus and skull floating in oil, leading many to believe that Shanann was trying to communicate from beyond the grave. Number 8. It was too cold to bury her. In 2003, on June 18th, William Devon Howell picked up 44-year-old Janice Roberts, who was transgender, and after an attempt to engage her in a sexual act, he strangled her. Roberts became the second of 7 victims Howell would murder before his eventual capture. Just 6 months earlier, Howell had killed another woman, and after Roberts, he went on to murder 5 more women. While awaiting his sentencing, Howell made chilling confessions to a fellow inmate. Referring to himself as a sick ripper possessed by a monster, he revealed gruesome details about his crimes. He admitted that he had kept one of his victims' bodies in his van for 2 weeks because, as he told his cellmate, it was too cold outside to bury her. Howell also confessed to severing her fingertips, pulling her teeth, and disposing of the dismembered body parts in Virginia. His Ford Econoline van, which he chillingly referred to as his murder mobile, served as his base for committing these horrific acts. Ultimately, Howell was sentenced to 6 consecutive life sentences, and though he expressed remorse in court, acknowledging that he deserved the death penalty, his horrifying legacy remains. The case of William Devon Howell leaves us with a terrifying portrait of a man who embraced the darkness within. Stay with us as we delve deeper into the chilling details of other horrifying crimes, right here on Odd Occasions. Number 7. Tell the police I had something stolen today around 4 p.m. On April 6, 2009, a horrifying discovery was made in a drained irrigation pond. The body of 8-year-old Sandra Cantu was found stuffed inside a suitcase. A post-mortem revealed that Sandra had been sexually assaulted and strangled, with traces of a sedative, alprazolam, found in her system. At first, the FBI believed they were looking for a male suspect with a history of child abuse. However, the investigation took a strange turn when a peculiar text message came to light. On the day Sandra disappeared, Melissa Huckabee, who was the mother of one of Sandra's friends, sent a text to Sandra's mother saying, "Tell the police I had something stolen today around 4 p.m. I'm not sure if it matters or not." Huckabee, a Sunday school teacher, later showed up at the police station claiming she had found a note that read, "Cantu locked in stolen suitcase." She also reported that her suitcase had gone missing. What Huckabee didn't realize was that surveillance footage had captured Sandra walking toward Huckabee's residence on the day she vanished. Even more suspicious, Huckabee reported her suitcase missing just minutes after she had driven away in her SUV. Further evidence came from witnesses who saw Huckabee near the pond where Sandra's body was found. The FBI then conducted a search of Huckabee's church, where they discovered a blood-stained rolling pin. The DNA on the rolling pin matched Sandra. In a shocking turn of events, Huckabee was arrested and charged with Sandra's murder. To avoid the death penalty, she pled guilty and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Number 6. A secret ingredient. Joe Metheny's rage boiled over when his drug-addicted wife abandoned him, taking their young son with her. Desperate to find them, Metheny searched the streets, checking halfway houses and scouring familiar places. He knew his wife had a habit of shooting up under a bridge near their home. When he arrived at the bridge, however, his wife and son were nowhere to be found. Instead, 2 homeless men were there. Frustrated and angry, Metheny demanded answers, but when the men couldn't help him, he snapped. He grabbed an axe and brutally murdered them both. Metheny disposed of their bodies in a nearby river. Though he was arrested and spent over 2 years in prison, awaiting trial, a lack of evidence led to his acquittal. But Joe Metheny's taste for violence didn't end there. Shortly after his release, he killed 2 women. He dismembered their bodies, but what he did next was beyond shocking. Metheny mixed their flesh with pork and beef, forming the grisly combination into hamburger patties, which he then sold at his roadside barbecue stand over several weekends. When Metheny was eventually arrested again, his chilling confession to police left them horrified. Metheny reportedly said no one complained because human meat tastes very much like pork. Joe Metheny was sentenced to 2 life terms for his crimes, but he was found dead in his prison cell in 2017, taking many of his horrifying secrets with him. Number 5. Upside Down Inside a Wall. Annie Le, a 24-year-old Yale University student, was just 5 days away from her wedding when she suddenly vanished in September 2009. She was last seen entering a laboratory on campus, but tragically, she never left. On the day that should have been her wedding anniversary, her body was discovered hidden inside a wall in the very same building. Annie's remains had been placed in an inverted position, and her body showed signs of severe trauma. She had been suffocated, with her jaw and collarbone broken while she was still alive, making the discovery even more horrifying for police. Soon after, Ray Clark, a lab technician, was arrested for the murder. Clark had previously sent Annie a hostile email, complaining about her leaving dirty mouse cages behind after finishing an experiment. While this might have been the trigger for his brutal attack, the full reason behind Clark's actions was never made entirely clear. In 2011, Ray Clark was sentenced to 44 years in prison for Annie's murder. Despite his conviction, the true motivation for this brutal crime remains a chilling mystery. Number 4. Killer Security System. For over 2 decades, the notorious BTK killer, later identified as Dennis Rader, terrorized the Wichita, Kansas area. Rader's killing spree began in 1974, when he targeted the Otero family, binding and suffocating 4 members of the household in their own home. While the family struggled to breathe inside the plastic bags he placed over their heads, Rader committed even more grotesque acts, heightening the horror. In March 1977, Rader struck again, this time killing Shirley Vian Relford. He locked her 3 children in the bathroom before carrying out the murder. Rader's arrogance grew as he continued his killings. In 1978, he sent a letter to a local radio station confessing to 7 murders. After killing Nancy Fox in 1977, he even called 911 to report the crime himself. Rader's taunting escalated. He wrote poems about his victims and sent them to the press for publication. Between his killings, Rader would take disturbing selfies, dressing in his victims' clothing and tying himself up in twisted reenactments of the murders. His killing spree continued sporadically, but his boldness led to his eventual capture. In 2005, Rader sent a floppy disk to a news station, believing it was untraceable. However, police used metadata from the disk to finally reveal the BTK killer's identity. Rader, who had been employed by the security company ADT, had spent years installing alarm systems in homes across Wichita. Ironically, many of these systems were installed by families who were terrified of the BTK killer. Rader was sentenced to 10 consecutive life sentences, bringing an end to one of the most chilling serial killer cases in history. Dennis Rader's ability to infiltrate the lives of those he terrorized, even installing their security systems, makes this case all the more unsettling. Stay with us as we uncover more terrifying details from the world of true crime, right here on Odd Occasions. Number 3. Highways of Horror. Every day, millions of drivers navigate the highways of California, but few realize that these roads might be the final resting places of many missing children. As many as 22 young victims are believed to have been kidnapped and murdered by Mac Ray Edwards, a man who buried many of his victims beneath the very highways he helped build. One of his victims, 8-year-old Stella Darlene Nolan, disappeared in June 1953 while playing at the Auction City Flea Market. Her mother, who was working nearby at a sandwich stand, had been expecting regular check-ins from her daughter. Stella kept in touch until 8 p.m., but by 9 p.m. she had vanished. Frantically, her mother, Elena, searched the flea market and, when Stella was nowhere to be found, called the authorities. Just a week before, a strange man had asked Elena if there was any possibility of kidnapping, purchasing, or stealing her daughter, a chilling prelude to the horror that would follow. Stella's abduction wasn't the last. Other children soon vanished, including 12-year-old Brenda Howell, 13-year-old Don Baker, 8-year-old Thomas Bowman, and 6-year-old Bruce Kremen. When MacRae Edwards was finally apprehended and charged with several murders, he confessed to many of the killings. He revealed that he had buried numerous victims under the roads of California, including beneath the Santa Ana and Ventura freeways. Edwards admitted to raping and strangling Stella before throwing her off a bridge. Shockingly, when he returned to check on her, she was still alive, sitting up. He then fatally stabbed her as she tried to escape. Stella's remains were eventually discovered by a highway crew in 1970, thanks to the directions Edwards provided. In 1971, while awaiting further charges, Edwards, a heavy machine operator who had helped construct many of California's highways, took his own life in prison. The thought that California's highways could conceal such dark secrets is a chilling reminder of the hidden horrors in our everyday lives. Stay with us as we uncover more disturbing tales from true crime here on Odd Occasions. Number 2. Former NFL player. On January 18, 1981, 20-year-old Sherry Hull was assaulted at gunpoint by a man who had broken into her workplace. While being forced down a hallway, the assailant encountered another young woman, Lisa Garcia. Without hesitation, he shot both women in the back of the head after sexually assaulting them. Sherry tragically died at the scene, but Lisa survived and immediately called the police after the attacker fled. Unbeknownst to the officers rushing to the scene, they drove right past the killer. The police quickly connected this brutal attack to a string of previous murders and assaults. With Lisa's help, they were able to create a profile of the man terrorizing the region. Eventually, she identified him in a photo lineup as Randall Brent Woodfield, a man who had once been on the path to NFL stardom. Woodfield was arrested and charged with multiple crimes, including Sherry's murder and Lisa's attempted murder. While he was convicted of those charges, authorities suspect him of being responsible for as many as 44 other homicides, earning him the nickname the I-5 Killer for the way his crimes followed the infamous highway. One of the most shocking revelations during the investigation was Woodfield's past. In 1974, he had been drafted by the NFL's Green Bay Packers. However, his football career was cut short after multiple arrests for indecent exposure, leading to his removal from the team. The story of Randall Brent Woodfield, the NFL player turned serial killer, is a chilling reminder that even those with seemingly bright futures can harbor dark secrets. Stay with us for more unsettling tales from the world of true crime, right here on Odd Occasions. Number 1. Vanishing Steps from Home. On the morning of April 13, 2011, 20-year-old Holly Bobo, a nursing student, disappeared from the backyard of her family's rural Tennessee home. Holly's mother, Karen, was at work when she received a disturbing call from a neighbor. The neighbor reported hearing a woman's screams coming from near the Bobo home. Panicked, Karen immediately called home, and her son Clint answered. She asked if everything was all right and whether Holly had already left for school. But when Clint informed her that Holly's car was still in the driveway, Karen knew something was wrong. As Clint prepared to call the police, he glanced out the window and saw his sister in the yard with a man dressed in camouflage. Believing the man to be Holly's boyfriend, Drew Scott, Clint hesitated, but Karen, knowing Drew was elsewhere, urged her son to act. Clint, confused and unsure of what to do, called out to both Holly and the man, but neither responded. Moments later, he watched helplessly as the stranger led Holly into the woods behind their home. Clint grabbed his firearm and ran outside, only to find blood on the ground near Holly's car. The first officers arrived shortly after, and a search was quickly launched. By the following day, searchers found Holly's lunchbox, a piece of paper with her name on it, and a pair of pink women's underwear. It wasn't until September 18, 2014, over 3 years later, that Holly's remains were found, concealed in a bucket in the woods. She had been shot in the back of the head. 6 men were arrested in connection with Holly's murder, with 3 facing charges of aggravated kidnapping and rape. After a lengthy trial, Zach Adams was convicted and sentenced to life in prison, plus 50 years. His brother Dylan was sentenced to 35 years, while Jason Autry negotiated a reduced sentence, receiving just 8 years. Autry was released in September 2020. We live in a time where stories of murder are just another headline, something we skim through and quickly forget. But each of these cases serves as a haunting reminder. Behind every statistic is a victim whose life was taken in the most brutal way. And while we may never fully understand what drives individuals to commit such heinous acts, one thing is certain: monsters do exist, and they walk among us every day. Thank you for joining us today on Odd Occasions. If this video left you with chills, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more deep dives into the eerie and unsettling. Until next time, stay safe and stay vigilant.